Hello, Dr. Naraniki here for the Millis Institute at Christian Heritage College, and in this summary lecture I'll be looking at Albert Camus. Teaching Camus from a Christian perspective is not exactly an easy task, as Camus' philosophy represents one of the strongest renderings of the existentialist worldview. A view in which the fundamental questions of life, the universe, and everything are left open. This is a very modernist attitude. And we see this even in the philosophy of science of Karl Popper and his idea of the open universe. So the idea of leaving the fundamental big questions unanswered is something that really came to the fore in the 20th century after the First World War, but particularly it was a tendency that was amplified after the Second World War in what's known as the existentialist movement, of which Camus and Sartre were two of the main exponents. However, this does not mean that Christians ought to avoid Camus. Rather, much can be gained from reading him. For instance, the resplendent and ineffable light in Camus' stories, I think, provides some sort of clue that North African light that envelops the characters in his stories, that envelops the scenery. I think there's a clue in that, so pay attention to his descriptions of light, atmosphere, warmth, humidity, all these kind of things. As Camus was, as he said, born into a world of poverty and light. So I think for the Christian reader, picking up on these motifs are something to be watchful for. Camus was against moralism, but this does not mean that he was not an ethical person with important insights into what makes us human. For Camus, we cannot make sense of the world in a way that previous philosophers, such as Kant with his categories, aim to do, or Hegel with his holistic, totalistic philosophy or system aim to do. So it's the polar opposite of the tradition of systematic philosophy. To the point, Camus thought it. Even compared to his friend and contemporary Sartre, Sartre didn't regard Camus as a philosopher. He thought he was a great author, but a pretty ordinary, at best, philosopher. So we're not seeing in Camus any sort of systematic explication of a philosophical worldview. Rather, we get gleanings of it here and there, lengthy articulations in some of his essays, essay novel works, sort of hybrid works. But it's something that after reading enough of his works, you kind of get a feel for his philosophy, the worldview he was presenting, the song he was singing more. I think that's often a better description, rather than, if we don't like using the word philosophy or particular philosophy, perhaps worldview or perhaps even song, best characterizes his the thing he was trying to get at, the thing he was trying to reach throughout his writings. keeping in mind that he died very young, before he was 50, in a car crash. So he was amazingly productive, given his short lifespan, and given that a lot of that time was spent dealing with things like his tuberculosis and living in Paris during the war years, being actively part of the French resistance there. So I mean, the time he had to be productive in theatre, in writing books, was very little. So he squeezed a lot out of his very short lifespan. So he's left us with quite a bit. And in different works, we see different Camus dealing with different phases. In this particular work, we're looking at in the guest. We're not so much dealing with the idea of the absurd, which came out in some of his other works. We're dealing with issues of revolt, rebellion, hospitality, responsibility, other issues. So we see that his works tend to cluster around various themes that he was engaging with throughout his short life, and to get a full sense of his overall philosophy, or the overall song he was singing, you really have to dip into each one of them, because at different times he was presenting different ideas in his writings. It's not so much like a Tolstoy, where you read one work, War and Peace, and then you kind of almost you kind of got it. Or even Kafka, whether you read Metamorphosis or The Trial, you pretty much got it. You only need to read one work of Kafka to pretty much get what he was on about in his other novels as well. But Camus, he does present very, I would say, very sophisticated ideas, and he develops them in sophisticated ways in his various books. So we're just looking at one work of his, so we're not getting a full picture. Just keep that in mind. But I think this is an important little work we're looking at. And particularly for this work, the guest, pay attention to the role of the idea of responsibility, and the way this is presented as being part and parcel with our sense and experience of freedom. Notice how I'm not using words like idea of freedom, but sense and experience, because for Camus, a lot of it is about becoming conscious of of things that are not at the front of the mind. Let's put it that way. Things that we do automatically. Things, almost values and attitudes that are embedded at a deep level that's not immediately apparent. And Camus tries to draw our attention to these moments of ethical decision making, which we often find we might be making a decision, but we're not really sure. We're not really conscious of the importance of that at that particular moment. We're just thinking we're choosing A or B. But for Camus, that why we choose A or B at which particular moment says a lot about us. So he's trying to draw our attention to that. It's trying to draw our attention to our reactions to our decision making. of that sense of that vague sense we have of being uneasy, or that vague sense of disquiet about something. When we had something that sort of that challenges our normal sort of routine about going about our day-to-day life. So he picks up on these little points of disruption, and tries to draw attention to our experiences of that, not in order to provide some sort of answer or provide some sort of moral explanation in the way, say, Tolstoy and other authors we've looked at have done, but rather just to draw attention to, okay, there's something going on here that we need to attend to. It's a profound aspect of our being, but we don't understand it, but this is something we need to be more aware of. It's interesting to note that the novel, the story The Guest, the word in French is simultaneously the word for both guest and host, indicating that there is a kind of a binding between the two. There is a mutual sort of reciprocity, mutual sort of obligations that both the guest and the host have. And as someone involved in a theatre, Camus, and I think people in the theatre have a heightened sense of awareness of this, because they see life as a kind of role play. And it's interesting to know authors who have previously worked in theatres. They kind of they have a heightened sense of the way everyday life has a certain role play aspect to it. And what does that role demand of us? What does the role of a host or a guest demand, and how are they interlocked? So pay attention to that. So yeah, the search for Camus, the search for meaning is not as important as our experience of something. So the experience is prioritized over the theoretical. And we can almost see as kind of the dismissing of that when he stated one time something to the effect of, "Shall I kill myself or have another cup of coffee?" That kind of Yeah, so pay attention to the experience of light, air, ocean, brightness, evening, coolness, calm winds, all these kind of things that come to the fore in his various writings. Light on a snow, all these things to pay attention to. So one level, we're kind of we are looking at the Camus playing with ideas of responsibility, hospitality, all these things that are very relevant to Christian philosophy. Another level, we are paying attention to his descriptions of the environment, the atmosphere, the scenery, and the effect of these on moods, and I think mood is a crucial term as well here, because what cannot be theorized can be picked up on via one's particular mood at a certain instance. That's very very Wittgensteinian sort of way of putting it. What cannot be theorized comes out in mood. Anyway. So it's almost Camus, his philosophy, it starts at the fundamental question, and this gets to the core of existentialism. Why should one not commit suicide? And it never really gets beyond that. Existentialism often doesn't get beyond that because it doesn't propose answers. It raises difficult questions and leaves the answer open. And I think for an answer to this question, to some extent, and I think comes by observing his actual lived life, the vitality, productivity, his love of life, activity, his concern with human suffering and injustice, all these kind of things. I think speak volumes. So, whereas we're not looking for a rationalistic. It's the opposite of rationalism. We're not looking for a rationalistic answer to what is the purpose, meaning of life. Although he gets at something like that in his works. But okay. But I think at the what we should draw attention to is Camus' own personal affirmation of life, of his own lived life, despite being opposed to Search's theoretical or institutional or organizational or official sort of attempts to identify and put your finger on a sense of something that is meaningful, and that the fact that for Camus something like that, trying to find meaning that you can articulate and to present this is the meaning of life, this is why we ought to keep living, leads to absurdities. So we don't really look at that in this particular work, but that's a theme that comes out in his myth of Sisyphus, that idea that search for attempting to state meaning, attempting to state ultimate answers leads to absurdities. That is that view that ultimate answers or ultimate solutions lead to absurdities is quite common in the 20th century, particularly after it's a reaction in a sense to Hitler in many ways. Hitler's view that he found the final solution, at least to the Jewish question. So there was a rebellion against ideas of final solutions, final answers, ultimate truths, ultimate meanings. So we can see one of the reasons for this. And we've been building up to this by looking at other writers. Say, we've seen this in Virginia Woolf to some extent, and Kafka. We've seen this in a Chekhov, building up this sense of rejecting established moral conventions, and then we see this with Camus and existentialism in full flourishing. We see this ultimate rejection of ultimate answers, ultimate totalistic, certain truths. So, where does that stand in relation to Christianity then? Christianity, the religion that proposes, that identifies, that commits itself to Christ as the way, the truth, and the light. Well, I think we have to look for other clues in Camus as well at this point, and in the existentialist movement as well. Because where they do find meaning is in things, is not in a theoretical, the commitment to various propositions, whether it's religious propositions or political propositions or solutions, or as can be formulated in words and arguments, but rather in things more subtle, like I've mentioned, in descriptions of the atmosphere, in descriptions of the faith, sorry, that was a Freudian slip, descriptions of the face, and the script, particularly in Camus' The Plague, when he's describing suffering and other things, we see that attention to the face. We see that also come out in the work of the Jewish philosopher Levinas as well. So the attention for the existentialist philosophers switches from the theoretical, at least in Camus' work, from the theoretical to the, you might put it in terms of the observational, the observing and describing people in their habitat, people in their environment, in their particular situation, and paying close attention to things such as their body language, their hand gestures, their facial expressions, and what that reveals. And I think that is a crucial point, in the sense that the truth often doesn't come out in words, in rational language. This was a point of Wittgenstein. The truth often reveals itself in other ways, in ways that are more, you will say, immediate rather than mediated. I think this is a good little distinction as well. Mediated knowledge that is we think about, and then we write down or we discuss, versus the immediate. And Camus drawing our attention to the immediate and the truths that are revealed in that. So I think that's something to pay attention to. I mean, the identifying postmodernism and existentialism with a kind of a very naive value relativism. Just because he does a commitment to articulated commitments or truths, it isn't something that you find in Camus. It's something that he was opposed to. I think the idea is saying that because he doesn't have makes these sort of particular commitments to ultimate truth, that the only other solution is value relativism. We don't find that value relativism we don't find that kind of relativism in his writings. we do register an emotional reaction to particular scenes, to particular interactions, to particular situations that he describes. And is the very fact that we do register emotively with the moral situations and reactions of the characters really points to the fact that that we can't equate existentialism with a naive moral relativism. So that's the end of today.